Welcome to the Oxfordshire Community Hub. I am delighted to welcome Jayne. Jayne is the CEO of Oxfordshire Community Foundation. Jayne, it's a great pleasure to have you with us, and thank you for joining us.
Manuel, the pleasure is all mine, especially if we're sat on a beach somewhere together. That's looking very, very...
So tell me, Jayne, what does being a CEO of Oxfordshire Community Foundation involve? How varied it is it, and how challenging might it be?
I think it's an incredibly varied job. I think when I joined the Community Foundation, I joined from a corporate world where there were lots of people and lots of resources and lots of ways to get things done. And I think the biggest change is actually the amount that you can get done with very limited resource, and that is incredibly humbling. It is also very busy, but I think actually it just shows you that if you have a will to want to sort of enable change, it can happen, and people come out in spades to really help and support what you're doing, and that is always very encouraging. So obviously I have a board of trustees who are more than interested in the governance of the organisation. They're also quite hands-on, they're very supportive, they're always there to sort of feedback things to and share ideas. So I think that whole environment there's a lot of support. I mean, obviously you are accountable as the chief exec for making sure things get done and delivered, but I think that you feel that there are always others that you can just check in with and make sure that it's okay for you not to have all the answers. You might have all the energy. I think that's probably one thing. I think what you need to bring to the organisation is a real desire to do great stuff, but actually what you need to do is to enable others to help you achieve that. And that's probably, I guess, one of the biggest challenges of the role. It's you can't do everything, and learning to involve other people is probably one of the biggest things that I've learned. And maybe the challenge is actually it's okay to ask for help, and often when you do, other people have even better ideas. So actually that makes again another way to get things done much quicker and better.
Collaboration is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
It's a real powerful thing. I think some people are generally very collaborative, and I think all the work that you've been doing, Manuel, is very much about bringing people together and having the power that comes from people with a shared goal. And I think that there's always been, I guess, a value of mine, that it's not really about competition. It's about what you can achieve together is probably always going to beat competition hands down. But it's a difficult thing for some people. They want to put themselves forward as the person when really it's a collective, isn't it?
Yeah, I've certainly found with my work that when we come together as a collaboration, as a partnership, nothing's impossible. We've just pulled off so many things with so little resource.
Absolutely.
Collaboration.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, the last sort of couple of months with COVID-19, that is actually what we have found, that the power that comes from people working to the same end has been phenomenal. And I guess the challenge for me is, how do we somehow bottle all of that up and make sure we don't lose that energy and that enthusiasm and that will to help each other, which has sort of come on leaps and bounds. Things that would never have happened or have taken years seem to have happened overnight. So it just shows you that where there's sort of potential, things can really change. So I think, collaboration is, I guess, a lot of what we do at the Community Foundation.
I suppose whilst we're talking about COVID-19, it's just been a huge, having a huge impact on all of our lives, and it's bringing about transformation and change in terms of OCF and in terms of what you do in the county. And I know you've just reached the £1 million mark, which has just
donations,
You know, that was a fund for resilience fund, wasn't it? For
It
COVID.
was for resilience, yeah. I mean, we started off with a very significant gift, so we're very grateful and very appreciative of the support given by the Indigo Trust in sort of kicking our ability to do more. But I think it's the will of people realizing that actually we probably had relationships down in local communities, so we could reach the groups that were really able to respond very quickly and do that very well. And so I think that's been a great opportunity for the Community Foundation just to sort of highlight that we do have all these relationships and networks and contacts. And I think one of the most amazing things is to see some of the organizations that we were perhaps their founding, if you like, funder, who are now going on to strength. So organizations like Sophia that have just been able to sort of, if you like, change their model slightly to really adapt. And I think that goes from having a really good organization and being able to see who those organizations are is perhaps how we use our knowledge at the Community Foundation, is just support the leaders who we know are putting everything together, working in partnership and reaching out across the county, because it's really important, I think, for the Community Foundation that is here for Oxfordshire, that we do absolutely represent the whole of the county, that we are not Oxford Community Foundation. We are very much Oxfordshire, and Oxfordshire is a very different place from maybe East Oxford or West Oxfordshire, and I think maybe that's what makes it very exciting as a county, that there are so many different sides to it.
Yeah, it's so varied, isn't it?
It's very varied.
I'm intrigued, Jayne, to find out more about, you know, you had a successful career in finance, in business. Why sort of move into the third sector? You know, the pay isn't great. You know, what is it? I mean, did you just suddenly one day decide, right, that's it, I've had enough of this, I'm going to go and do something else? Or what was the sort of catalyst for this?
I think it sort of creeps up on a lot of people, doesn't it? I think many people would call it a midlife crisis. Maybe you go and buy a flash car, or you go and do something really, you know, scary, like drive a motorbike. Or I guess for me, it wasn't something that just happened overnight. I think that I'd always been very aware of inequality and injustice. And, you know, I think, and I wouldn't say I was guilty, but I felt very conscious that I'd had a privileged, you know, education. I had a great job, and everything had been an opportunity for me. Everything sort of stacked up in my life to enable me to achieve things. And I gradually began to realize that that wasn't the case for everyone. It really isn't like that. And I'd always been worried about, you know, waste and wanting to take things to charity shops and not wasting food. And so I guess it was something in my psyche that there was actually more that we could do as individuals. It wasn't someone else's problem. We were all part of the problem. And I mean, I had 22 years at Barclays. And so, you know, when I left, I was a corporate director, and I was working with lots of large businesses. And I think the thing that really impressed me about them was many of them were very paternalistic to their employees. They felt a sense of responsibility that, yes, they were obviously in business to make money, but perhaps money wasn't the only motivation, because they took that responsibility, I would say, quite seriously, to the point that it almost was an anxiety that if the business didn't succeed, they were responsible for their employees' families, for their mortgages, for their livelihoods. And that sort of, I think, struck a chord that in their own way, businesses were part of the community solution, because so many people in the community relied on them for employment and their livelihoods. And that was that sense of interconnectedness, that what are we all doing to make the collective better, I think sort of struck a chord with me. And also, obviously, working in banking, it's all about money. And but what you realize is, well, some people can have money and some people can lose money and make money again. The one thing that makes us equally vulnerable is our time. No one, it doesn't matter how rich they are in the world, can buy more time. you know, can buy a different life, can buy time on this planet. And bad things can happen to them, tragic things, illness. And I guess I began to realize, you know, what do we want to do with our time? If we've only got so much time, when we look back on our life, will we say, well, yeah, I had a nice house and I had all of these things, but what did I really do to help other people? What did I do that made other people's lives beyond mine better? And I think that was sort of my eureka moment, that maybe what I could really give to a charity was, you know, I'd been well trained, I'd been honed and skilled by the corporate machine. I didn't have a problem asking people for money, because obviously I had to do that all the time with my business customers. I was basically, you know, charging fees and saying, you want to do this? Well, it's going to cost. So I think I could see that actually that way of being able to talk to people about, well, actually it's to your benefit. You want to do this, but we can only do that if you give us this. There seemed to be some sort of, I guess, linkage back to the charitable world, that actually that could be a skill that could be quite useful, because maybe many of the people that charities need to engage with are business people. They're people that have been successful, and you need to almost form a bridge between the business world and the charitable world. And I think in the 10 years that I've been at the Community Foundation, probably the most encouraging thing that I've seen is that business really, I think, is moving towards becoming more of a force for good. That business is starting to understand, you know, we are part of the ecosystem here, and we can make a difference to communities. And again, going back to, you know, COVID-19, I think we've got some really good examples of corporates who have really stepped up beyond probably people's, you know, ever imaginings, you know, for, you know, organizations like Burberry's to be making PPE. And, you know, I think it's really encouraging that actually this is, if we all work together, we could, like we said at the very beginning, we could achieve so much more. So it should never be about them and us. And I guess that's how it felt at Barclays, that there was always, you know, the idea that the business world was better and they had the better ideas, and that isn't the case. I think together we're actually really powerful, because you need the blend of people with different ambitions and, you know, different, I think, probably areas of caring. You know, we don't all have to be hard-nosed and, you know, always busy. You need some people that are a little bit more measured and thoughtful and reflective. And I think the blend of that is what attracted me really to the Community Foundation.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I'm always fascinated with these skills that we pick up in business and finance, because, you know, at one point I had a trading company. I could buy anything from anywhere in the world, you know, and then you take all of those skills into the charitable sector. And how did you find that move? And you know, did you have any preconceptions about the charitable sector in terms of, you know, how you know, how they might have you know, functioned, you know, how you could contribute the skills that you've kind of picked up in business and finance?
I think a sense of humility is the first thing that you have to bring, because I think you have to sort of park the career that you've had before, because it isn't all appropriate. Whilst the skills, as you say, that they will be transferable, but I guess you can't assume that your way is going to work. So what might have worked before might need to be adapted. But I guess that sort of sense of knowing what is possible in the outside world is quite a refreshing outlook to bring to the charitable sector, because as most people will know, most charities have restricted funds. You know, they don't have an unlimited, you know, there isn't like a wheelbarrow that keeps getting filled up with pounds, so that every time they want to do something, it can happen. So I think you learn that you have to be very creative with how you do things, but also that attitude of what is possible is, I think, adds a sense of energy to the organization, because I think where you've known what is possible and what people can achieve when they do have the right finance in place, you sort of understand that a little bit of rigor, maybe a little bit more rigor, and explaining things in a very sort of business-like approach, where actually if you want to do something, it's going to take this amount of budget and you're going to need this amount of staff. So that element of planning, perhaps, rather than just because you want to help, you just rush off and do things, probably can help to bring in more money when it's a little bit more packaged up, that it's thought through. So I think that's a sort of skill that I guess you realise could be helpful, because it actually helps the ambition of the organisation. Because otherwise, my team and I, we often talk about a poverty mindset, that because you're a charity, you never think about what you could do. You only think about what might be possible with what you currently have. So this sense of ambition that the charity could achieve greater impact if we had more people, or there were, like we're seeing with COVID-19, the fact that many charities didn't have the technology or the laptops to be able to go and support many of the beneficiaries that they're helping remotely. It sort of like highlights there are these deficits, whereas no business would allow a deficit. They would sort of think, well, we need this because it's going to help us do what we need to do. And I guess that's been a very powerful motivator. I mean, and you've said it yourself earlier. It's things that you thought were impossible become possible because you just realize what you might need, and that you could get those things. So I think that's a that sense of ambition is probably something that is quite interesting to bring as well.
So looking at county-wide and with COVID-19, what are the big challenges do you think we face in the county, and where might the opportunities lie for us?
I think that the most immediate challenge that I see is, how do we harness this this excessive goodwill that has suddenly, we call it the sort of power of community, that has come together very, very sort of cohesively and stepped up and really been very compassionate and thinking about others. How do we ensure that we don't lose that becomes the new normal, that it's actually, even the clapping, where people have been meeting their neighbours on the street where they may never have spoken to their neighbours before. I mean, we've created some very new experiences that hopefully have been shared and people want to continue. So for me, I think that's perhaps one of our biggest opportunities, is to how do we mobilise that and sort of give it flight, to do new things, but so that people do things together and really think about how they can help one another in their community. Because I think what we've seen is communities are the best place to start, because they're small and people generally are going to care about where they live or their neighbours. And so somehow making it possible to really recognise and reward that is probably, I'd say, one of the challenges. Another one I think we're seeing is this digital deficit. How do we as a county highlight where so many people in our communities, they're not online. Not everyone has Wi-Fi or broadband in their homes. Not everyone has laptops, mobile phones. And while some people might find that incredibly strange, they couldn't imagine a world without technology. There are pockets of population where that is the reality, and I think, especially if we're looking at the older population, who've perhaps never been brought up like your children with technology, that they feel, I've got to this age in life, I don't need it. But probably what we're finding is there are real benefits to be able to be connected with others, your families that might not be living close by, might be in another county. This can bring quite a lot of joy. So how do we make it much simpler for people who might not previously have engaged and thought it wasn't for them, but actually there is so much opportunity to enrich their life? And we've had ideas that, neighbours could share a Wi-Fi connection. If it's an older person and actually all they really want to do is, you know, have a call with their grandchildren every few days, why wouldn't you as a neighbour think, well, of course you can link into my Wi-Fi? So I think that is, so finding much simpler solutions, because I think for me, often we try to institutionalize everything. That we think it has to be really big, and we imagine it's a massive machine that needs to be built, you know, but actually it's lots of little actions in aggregate. So I guess that for me is those are the sort of challenges that I think we need to address. But this idea of also working more in partnership, understanding that as an organization, like we said at the beginning, you can achieve so much more if you bring in the help and support of others. You don't have to do every bit of it yourself. And if organizations understood that, you know, maybe the business community is there to help them, there are lots of different partners that we might not have considered our friends, that actually that builds a community then as well, doesn't it? So I think those are, for me, that would be, you know, sort of independent, non-political agenda where everyone is actually just trying to improve local lives would be a real goal.
Yeah, I suppose one defining aspect of COVID-19 has to be the re-emergence, as it were, of the community.
Absolutely.
People actually feeling that they're part of a neighborhood where before, you know, you hardly ever saw your neighbors and so on, but yet people were going around putting things through the letterbox saying, look, if you need any help, we can do anything for you, please let us know. And that's been throughout the county, and I think throughout the nation.
It has, and I think it's that permission, because I know before safeguarding and, you know, health and safety and people, it comes back to institutionalizing. And then whilst we understand all of those things are absolutely essential to keep people safe and the welfare of vulnerable people, but it's almost got to a point where people as neighbours felt they didn't have permission to knock on a neighbour's door and say, are you okay? You know, so hopefully we've maybe taken away some of the risk that people felt, you know, that actually there are ways to manage this. And maybe social distancing, that might be a positive of that, you know, you won't have to get too close to someone. It's acceptable to be at a distance, but you can still be very friendly and look out for them. So I agree that's and that's really what the Community Foundation is all about. It's this idea that it's here for everyone. It's everyone contributing, doing what they can, but actually coordinating in a way that we achieve more, rather than all going off and doing little bits of it ourselves and not really achieving great impact.
So, Jayne, you've had amazing, I think, just over 10 years at the OCF. You've been, I think you've been a wonderful, huge success. And if I were to ask you, what are the core leadership skills and qualities and characteristics might a successful CEO require? What would those be? I know it's a big one.
I think real passion for the job. I think to be successful, you need to really believe in what you do. I think a really long time ago, I had some sort of coaching, and that they use the word eminence, and it sort of whenever you say something, the way that you say it's obviously true, because it just, there's no way that you can be lying, because your body language and the tone of voice, the way that you look at people, and I think that is absolutely critical for a chief exec. You have to love what you're doing, believe that you can make a difference, and that it's a worthy endeavor, because otherwise, you know, it's not just a job. Because you know, you're actually accountable for the organization, so you want to make that organization a success. So I think that's probably the first thing, that if you don't believe in what you're doing, it's never going to work. So, you know, it's like somebody maybe doing something for climate change but thinking, well, it's never going to be a problem. I mean, you've got to really think it's a problem, haven't you? So that's got to come across. And I think the thing that I've really enjoyed is this idea to be very open, that I would say it isn't about competition, that sometimes going the extra mile for other people when there's no benefit to yourself is a really powerful thing to do, because you build great relationships that way. And you learn a lot about other people by being very open to other people's ideas and what they need. And if you can help them in any way by joining up the dots with people that you know, I think that helps build your network and your own credibility and the way that people think about you, because it's never all about you and your organization. So I think that that's probably something that I would hope, if people look back, you know, on the 10 years of the community, how we've managed to move the organization on, that would be hopefully something that they would see, well, that's because they did that. It wasn't really helpful for them at the time, but so I think that, and then that becomes like a, you know, a rolling stone, doesn't it? It gathers a little bit of momentum, more people begin to hear about you, know about what you're doing. So that's two things. I think ambition. You know, I don't think we should be complacent as chief executives. I don't think we should think we're just in the job, caretaking the role, just doing the things that are safe. You know, I think sometimes you have to make mistakes. You know, mistakes are good. Not everything works out. But you almost, I mean, one of my team says you should do things quickly and realize that they're wrong and then correct them, not spend huge amounts of time and years, you know, trying to perfect it, because actually you'll have missed so much opportunity. So I think that idea of being very willing that sometimes you won't get it right, but to be honest that when you have not, maybe it hasn't quite worked out, to share why it didn't work out, you know, to be really honest around, I wouldn't say failure, because everything is you learn, don't you? And it's part of the experience, and it might help you develop the next thing. But yes, so the idea of being open and ambitious, but people, I think, you know, you have to like people. As a chief executive, you're there to support your team. You have to care deeply about the team, because they need to feel very motivated and empowered in the work that they do. So I think bringing a sense of, you know, involvement to the team, it can't always be about the chief exec making all the decisions. The team need to feel that they have a way to influence things and get things done better or quicker. I think that those are sort of good things to sort of look out for. But I don't know, you may have many more. I mean,
Yeah, no, I think it's just believing in things, isn't it? You know, actually having a passion for it, and learning from our, you know, mistakes. Or I love the idea of, you know, nothing's a failure. You know, we just learn. I
you
think
just,
that's what
yeah,
leadership is, isn't it?
yeah. And if you don't, you know, if you're not failing, people would say, well, you're not learning. And like we said, it's being complacent. There's no point continuing just to sort of, you know, stall things because you think, well, that's always worked, we'll just carry on, because actually the world is changing. And I think COVID-19 has sort of shown us that, you know, at any point, and I mean, how many people will have done SWOT analysis and pests and, you know, thinking, well, that's a silly exercise. Why are we worrying about what these possible scenarios are? But if you're really not thinking about how the world is changing around you, then I think your organization won't be relevant, because it has to match with where we are in society and the world, doesn't it? It can't stay the same. You know, so I think those are quite, you know, and business is it's a good leveler to look at. You know, how has business changed? You know, would we really have thought of having driverless cars? You know, I mean, but all these things are going to happen, aren't they? So what does that mean? Will people want to own cars? Well, maybe not. They might want to. So I think you've just got to think, well, they may not be relevant to me, but they are, because that's going to be the world in which we have to operate too.
Yeah, yeah. So, Jayne, how are you and the team remaining resilient in this sort of COVID-19 lockdown?
Right.
Situation?
I think the team responded incredibly well to being able to work from home. I think a lot of people love being in an office environment. There's quite a bit of banter. it adds a sort of structure to their day, going to work, coming into the office. You know, and whilst a lot of work gets done, there's often a lot of chat and a lot of coffee gets drunk. Or if it's me, I have coffee cups that have coffee in them and they go cold. I waste a lot of coffee. But I think trying to build that sense of teamness is something that we've really tried to embrace. So I think when we started working from home, we said it was really important that we sort of checked in twice a day. So we had sort of 2 calls a day where hopefully all of the team would be able to come. Just first one really for a chat, just like they might chat whilst they're making coffee, just to check in, you know, how are your children, just to keep that sense of the relationship, understanding what was going on in people's lives. So I think that was something that the team has responded really well to. And then having more of a work focused one at another time in the day, so that if people have got things that they're not too sure about or need to check in with somebody else, they could do that in a very open forum, and other people could chip in. And I think that sort of set the routine then to the working day, because I guess the challenge with working at home for many people that might not have done that is, where does the day begin? Where does it end? It's easy to have your laptop on the whole time, keep it on the kitchen table, check your emails on your phone, whatever. But not everyone has worked like that. So I think trying to build in respect for space at home is important. A lot of them have children, and homeschooling is, I think, been a challenge, which, you know, is very diverting. I mean, you can't ignore your children like you can't ignore your pets. And if you're at home, it's quite difficult to get that balance between being in work mode but actually being at home. So I guess being a little bit respectful of that is, but so I think everyone has responded well. I think holidays are a problem though, because it's quite difficult. People don't want to take holiday when there's nothing new. They're already at home. So I think we've been talking about that. Actually, it's okay to have time off. And actually, I think now we're getting to the stage where people are thinking, no, I could do with a little bit of a break or a few days where I'm not online. So I think, you know, understanding that everyone gets to a different stage at different points is probably been one of the things that's kept us resilient. You know, we had a lot of work to do at the beginning and everyone was very busy, and that was fine. But actually to keep that pace is not going to be fine for the next 12 months. So we just need to keep recalibrating, I call it, you know, just reassess what are our priorities? Are we working on the right things? But actually, you know, we're not driving around and we're not commuting. So actually we're building in more time, aren't we, effectively as well? So
yeah, I just, you know, I have been thinking whether I'd ever want to go into London for a meeting, if I can do it on Zoom, you know, because that's 3 hours or 4 hours gone, you know.
It is just for maybe a very short meeting, you know. I mean, and that comes back to my sort of optimism for the future, that I really, really hope that we will challenge what is actually essential going forward. You know, you don't have to be present. I think we found with, you know, the technology, people can feel that they're together, but they're not in the same, you know, room. So, and that must work for businesses that work globally. And as you say, going into London, all the time spent on traveling, I mean, it's just a waste of time, isn't it?
Yeah. So Jayne, what would your message be for the county, for people who are listening and watching this?
I think we are so lucky to live in Oxfordshire. It is a fantastic county. But I think what the 10 years of the Community Foundation have told me, it is still a very unequal county. And I think, you know, we all owe it to everyone in our community to try and do what we can to make life a lot fairer and more just for people that may not have set out with the same opportunities and advantages. And I think the more we can do to understand and find a way to bring people together from different experiences and different backgrounds, then that's when I think Oxfordshire would really start to become fantastic. You know, it's already a global icon, but it's not yet a global exemplar of equality. And I think if we could really put forward Oxfordshire as, you know, with that sort of title, then the whole world would look up and say, well, if they did it in Oxfordshire, we can do it anywhere. Because, you know, we're a tiny county, and it isn't that difficult, as we found with COVID-19. People can find out who their neighbours are. You know, we are quite close, and we're not millions. You know, we're at 650,000. It's not a lot. And when you compare it to some of the big cities around England, we've got huge potential, and that would really, I think, well, we've really achieved something great.
If anyone can, Oxfordshire can.
I believe that wholeheartedly, and I think that's probably one of the things I've learned, why things are possible in Oxfordshire, because we have the brains of the planet, we have very liberal, tolerant people who want to make a difference, lots of young energy, and I think that's you bring all that together, you've got a powerful mix then, haven't you?
And all great things start from Oxford.
Well, you know, or Oxfordshire, but
Jayne, thank you so much. I know you're very, very busy. You've got a lot going on, but you know, to make time for us, I'm so grateful, and thank you for the friendship, and thank you also for all that you do for the county. You know, you make a huge difference to many lives, and so thank you for all
that. Well, it's a pleasure, and I think it's a privilege, and it's the Community Foundation. I think that's its little secret power. Is, you know, we hope to make a difference and to continue to make a difference. So yes, it's a joy, and always good talking to you, Mono.